Hey, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Men for Life podcast. I'm Sean Corcoran, the CEO of Men for Life. Today, I am excited to be joined by Daniel Breeden with Tennessee Right to Life. How are you today, Daniel?
I'm doing well, brother. How about you?
I'm doing fantastic. We have been having a lot of conversations over the last several days or the last couple of weeks about what is going on right now in the pro-life movement. And what it kind of brought me to, especially after going to the March for Life, after seeing some of the big conferences and the speakers and, and seeing some of the things that came out of that, almost from an adversarial or confrontational standpoint, has really kind of gotten people thinking. You sent me an article this morning, right? About this. I sent you one that I got yesterday. And I think I've had a dozen articles written about division in the pro-life movement since last week. And I think that that's a really important conversation to have. And what it kind of brought me to after the experience at the March for Life, and being fresh into this, only 18 months now into my position, coming from a law practice. And so really being fresh in the pro-life movement, but God's blessing me and getting me really immersed in it and having these fresh eyes to say, hey, what are we doing? And so I had this idea to start this podcast series and to call it, What Should the Pro-Life Movement Want? And you're the first person that I'm going to be talking to about this with the goal of really starting people thinking. There's a lot of organizations that have been around for a very long time, and I'm not saying that in a negative way. They've been there from the beginning, and I think that's fantastic. Is the work they're doing today the same, meeting the same objective that they set forth when they started? There's a lot of organizations that are new, fresh people coming into this. Men for Life is one of them. There's other organizations that are new that are saying, hey, we don't feel that the people who have been in this for the past 50 years have accomplished what they set out to accomplish. There has to be a different way. We're going to approach it from a different way. And then there's people in the middle, and then we've got the thousands of pregnancy centers. We've got people working on the outside, people working on the inside, people working on the ground every day. We've got the Sidewalk Advocates for Life, 40 Days for Life. All these organizations that have the goal of supporting the movement, and everybody's kind of working. It feels like sometimes on their own. And so what I wanted to do was explore from all the different perspectives, what is it? What is it that we should want? And how do we get there? Like, how do we really get there? And, is the work that we're doing today, the work that we're saying is needed in order to get there? And so in addition to you, Abby Johnson is the one who really started this in my head. And I think in a lot of people's heads with the videos. She's put out her speech at Life or Death Con on Thursday before the march. Some of the things she said after that, specifically as it goes to criminalizing women. I'm going to say from the beginning, and I'll say this in every episode, and I've already told Abby's team this, that I disagree with the idea of criminalizing women. That is not something that I nor Men for Life supports. But I think the conversations are important. And the reason that I really wanted to start this is because another thing she said at Life or Death Con is, I don't want to end abortion in 20 years. I want to end abortion today. And I think that's the big thing, is she's suggesting, and the people who are following her right now are suggesting, we want to end this as quickly as possible. Is what we're doing today going to help us to do that? And, and I shared with you privately yesterday my thought on that statement, which is, a lot of times, and I've been guilty of this, where I've said, even at the march, right? Even on the morning of the march before I went and heard Abby's speech, the morning before the march, I was at the Pro-Life Advocates Conference, which is hosted by the March for Life. And I made the comment that I make a lot about my son who was with me, who's 11, and how the reason that it's necessary to change the culture and for men to lead in changing the culture is because he will see this. His generation will see this. And they are going to be the ones that end abortion, right? So I've fallen into this idea that abortion's not going to end for a very long time. And I think that a lot of us have fallen into that idea. And for Abby to say, I want abortion to end today, really made me think, because if I say abortion's not going to end until my son ends it, right, in 30 years, 40 years, 50 years, I'm really foregoing the power of God to have the impact that he wants to have at the time that he wants to have it. Whereas if I say abortion's not going to end for another 5 or 10 years, and every day I get up and I go to work and I say abortion's not going to end for another 5 or 10 years, then every day I've gotten up and I've pushed that mark another 5 or 10 years down the road. As opposed to if I get up every day and I say, I want to end abortion today, and the work that I'm going to do throughout today is going to be towards that goal of ending abortion today. And then tomorrow I get up and I say, I'm going to end abortion today. Eventually, one of those days I'm going to be right? And, you know, and I look at it the way that I look at fatherhood. Every day my goal for being a father is perfection. I will never achieve that goal. But every day I get up, my goal is perfection. And so if I get up every day and I do the very best that I can do, then eventually I'll get as close as I possibly can to it, right? The difference is I believe we can end abortion. And so if we get up every day and say, I'm going to work to end abortion today, then I think that, and it can't just be me, and it can't just be Abby Johnson, and it can't just be, you know, whoever's listening to her, right? It has to be all of us working to end abortion today. Then we will. The day will come when we will. And so you know, that's my thought on this. Whether or not that is actually the goal of all the pro-life organizations, I don't know, and I'm not judging anyone if I find out that that's not their goal yet. I'm not judging them yet, because maybe they have a goal that makes more sense. But I want to have these conversations. I want other people to hear these conversations. I want to be able to get people's thought processes going so that nobody is following anyone blindly, but everyone has the opportunity to hear all the different perspectives and to make their own informed decisions. And so I'm very grateful for you agreeing to be the first guest in this series and to come on and you know, kind of share your thoughts on this, because I think, you know, I know, because we stayed on the phone for 2 hours yesterday unintentionally, just kept talking about it. And so I know that you have a lot of great thoughts on this. Before we jump into that, why don't you share with us what you do and how you got to where you are today in the pro-life movement?
Absolutely. Thank you, brother. I want to say first, thank you so much for what you're doing. Thank you for what you're doing for Men for Life, igniting the passion and the desire that needs to be across our nation for men engaging in the pro-life movement, the pro-life community, becoming a part of community throughout this nation. And I think you're a great voice in that. I think you're a great leader in that. So I appreciate what you're doing. My why is what I always call it. My why started May 14th, 1988. The Carroll County bus crash in Carrollton, Kentucky happened in front of my childhood home. And to make a long story short, I was standing on the front porch and I heard God speak to me that day as I'm listening to children scream on a bus that had been hit head on by a drunk driver. As I'm listening to those kids scream, I heard a voice as plain as what we're talking today, Sean, and said, "You're going to spend the rest of your life rescuing kids off of that bus." I was 7 years old, and that calling has taken me throughout my entire life. Everything that I've been involved in, I've been involved in ministry, and I've been involved in nonprofits for a long time. I've been a youth pastor, I've been a college-age pastor, inner-city work. I've been involved in nonprofits for over 20 years. And seeing all of that come to the point where today I am in the role, 7 months into the role of executive director of Tennessee Right to Life. And it's because of a prayer. It's because of something that was spoken to me May 14th, 1988, when God said, "You're going to spend the rest of your life rescuing kids off of that bus." And being into this role for 7 months, God has given me the honor. He's given me the opportunity to go about as far upstream as you can go of rescuing kids off of that burning bus. And I am thankful for that. I'm appreciative of that. I'm honored to be in the mission of life. I'm honored to be a part of the community. And like I said, I'm only 7 months into this role, but learning a lot as we go forward about what God has called. And I'm not gonna apologize one bit. I'm gonna say it up front. I'm gonna be honest. You're gonna hear a lot of themes from me throughout this podcast that refer to the Bible. That's what I stand on. That's what I believe. That's the person that I am. I make zero apologies for that. And that's what God has called me to be. So I am the executive director of Tennessee Right to Life, which we're consistently looking at legislative issues, upholding the things pertaining to life from the beginning of life to the end of life, abortion, euthanasia, end of life issues, disability, all of those things. But beyond that, God has called me and has called Tennessee Right to Life to uphold His laws. That is what we're called to do. So that's what we're going to do in Tennessee.
Awesome. So what does Tennessee Right to Life do? Tennessee Right to Life is an affiliate of National Right to Life. Am I correct in saying that?
That's correct.
Okay.
That is correct. Yeah.
And so what are the main objectives of Tennessee Right to Life? Or the main...
So main kind of our lane in the nonprofit world and in the mission of life is to really be the gatekeeper of the law in the state of Tennessee. We're sending a lobbyist to the state capitol, meeting with legislators and meeting with people who are involved in making the laws, that any law that pertains to abortion, disability, end of life, all of those things. So that's our main focus. That is our main goal, is to make sure that we are consistently building the framework to build on one layer after another on the foundation of life and protecting life for families here in the state of Tennessee. But it's more important than just that. It's not just about the laws. We know that it has to go beyond that. If you want to put laws in place that protect families, that protect children, the unborn, the disabled, the ones that are facing end-of-life issues, then you have to be willing to go beyond that. And we are. And that is what we do by things like our Choose Life plate, where all of the funds that come through that are being funneled back to the pregnancy resource centers, maternity homes, things such as that throughout the state of Tennessee. So we're all about being partners in this. This is not Daniel Breeden show. This is not Tennessee Right to Life's. We have it all right, and we're going to sit in a silo in Tennessee and hope for the best that everything works out. No, we want to get our hands dirty. We want to be a part of the community that is working hands-on with the women, the families, the men that are coming to these pregnancy resource centers and other pro-life organizations here in Tennessee. And then the last one would be is educating. Education is power. And a lot of our churches, organizations, families, individuals lack education in the state of Tennessee about laws that are pertaining to life. So when we have a law that comes through that tries to slip through the cracks, that's supporting things like assisted suicide, euthanasia, something against tearing down the things that we've built up to support abortion laws here in the state, we're right on top of that and making sure that things are going according to what God would see fit here in the state of Tennessee.
So you guys work hand in hand with legislators?
Yes, sir.
And so what is the mission of Tennessee Right to Life? Do you know that offhand?
So Sean, I
run an organization, and I'll tell you what, man, like whenever I know I'm going to have to say what the mission of Men for Life is, I make sure I go back and read it 3 or 4 times, because I should have it memorized by now, and I do, but I'll slip it up if I mess up.
Yeah,
so I don't mean to put you on the spot.
Being 7 months in, I'm not going to quote it word for word, but it is definitely upholding the life of all from beginning of life to the end of life. It's supporting everything in between and upholding those laws to see that is what that we are all about here in the state of Tennessee. So the mission is very clear. We want to protect life from the beginning of life to the end of life.
Yeah. And so when we talk about division, right? and the division that's going on right now. I know from previous conversations with you that one of the confrontations that you have in your organization is with abolitionists. So for the people who may not know yet what that means, can you kind of share what your perspective of what self-proclaimed abolitionists, what that means?
Yes, so Sean, I'm very careful of diving into conversations, putting this out on a podcast like this, as I'm sure you are as well, as I'm sure many others are, of labeling a group of people and pulling them all into one basket, so to speak, putting everybody into one basket and saying those are the abolitionists over there and we are the this, whatever
Right.
label that somebody's going to put on us being on it. So that automatically, you just said it, it automatically creates division
Yeah.
when you start saying and labeling people. So I'm very careful to say, this is who I think are abolitionists. I would want to start by saying, I want to be very clear of saying, this is what I feel and this is what I understand as the
Yeah.
executive director of Tennessee Right to Life, of what I'm being led to believe, of what I'm being asked to believe, of what I'm being the differences in the movement, the differences in going from A to B. We all want to see abortion end. We want to see abortion abolished. I believe everybody that is listening to this that calls yourself pro-life, you're going to be able to agree with that one thing, is that we want to see abortion end. That is the goal. I think it's how we go about going from A to Z of
Right.
seeing that. And I think there are the differences that I see, this is my opinion, that I see in the pro-life mission of what we are doing at Tennessee Right to Life, what I see others doing at other organizations, and what I feel is coming from the abolitionist movement. And to put it specifically, I feel like that we are drifting away, Sean, from the basis of what unites us. There's division happening. There are two sides that are forming. There are accusations that are being thrown back and forth. And I believe it's because of one thing. We are not following God's law and God's principles, how we go about accomplishing a mission together in unity. And I'll go back to where I really want to start here. It's 2 Chronicles chapter 7, verse 14. I believe we know what a law is. A law says something to the effect of, if this, then this. That's what a law does. If you drive 90 miles an hour down an interstate, this is probably going to happen to you. You might escape it once or twice or whatever that may be, but there's a really good chance you're going to get pulled over, you're going to get thrown in jail. That's what, so there's laws that are in place. When I look at God's law pertaining to what we're doing in this movement, I have to look at 2 Chronicles 7:14 that says, if my people, which are called by my name, will humble themselves, number one, pray, seek my face, and turn from their wicked ways. That's the recipe that I believe God has given us. That's the things that I'm seeing that divides the two sides right now, is that there's not a call from both sides to enter into this with humility as number one.
Right.
That's what has to guide us. That's what has to lead us. That's the guardrails that we have to put up. That no matter what we say, no matter what we do, number one recipe in God's law is to humble ourselves. So if you're listening to one side that's saying the words like I and me and my organization and what I can do, that's immediately a red flag that says there's no humility in that. When you hear an organization say this is about us and what we can do together and what God has called us to do together in this mission, I would open your ears up and listen to where that voice is coming from. Humility, humble ourselves, pray, seek his face, turn from our wicked ways. And then the verse says, then will I hear from heaven. God says he'll hear from heaven, forgive our sins, and heal our land. So if I had to say, Sean, you asked what do I see as the dividing pieces here? It's not as much as what we want to see as the end goal. The end goal is the same.
Right.
It's how we're going about getting there, and it's not even the C, D, E. It's the back here to the A and B. Where do we start at? We start at humility. We start at calling for a national day of prayer and forgiveness for the things that's been committed in our country for over 50 years. That's where this has to start.
Yeah. You know, and I think that's really important because that gets to the heart of kind of where I'm at too, which is instead of taking the position that, and you said something, you said, you know, that we all want to abolish abortion. And I'm going into this with the idea that everyone I speak to will say that is their goal. However, there are organizations, and when I say abolitionists, you know, I want to clarify that I'm talking about self-proclaimed abolitionists. I don't want to put anybody in a box that they're not in. I was at a conference where every single speaker said, we disagree with the abolitionists, and then everything they said after that sounded very much to me like what the abolitionists say. So there is disagreement even on the extremes of what people believe, right? Or what that term even means. So, but I think that one of the things that I've noticed coming from people who call themselves abolitionists is that they will say that what they call the pro-life establishment, which would be the Right to Life organizations, and many other organizations, but those that have been in there for a long time, that the ones that work to pass the laws, like the heartbeat laws and the incremental laws, that they do not truly want to end abortion. You know, Kristen Hawkins is a great example. She keeps getting attacked by self-proclaimed abolitionists as not really wanting to end abortion, with no basis. You know, I think that there's been some accusations that she spoke out against a specific bill in a specific state, you know, 5 years ago, and that the words that she used are evidence that she does not want to end abortion. I disagree. I think Kristen Hawkins very much wants to end abortion. I think she's dedicated her life to raising up an army of students that are on 1,600 campuses now, young people, to fight for life, you know. And Kristen Hawkins is not a lobbyist. You know, she may have some ability to get in there and to say what she has to say, but you know, her objective and her mission and her organization is set up to raise an army of pro-life advocates, and she's been very effective at that. And so, you know, the idea that she doesn't want to end abortion, I think, is just absolutely absurd. But I think that it gets to the heart of a bigger picture that that instead of going in and saying, hey, let's have these conversations, we're going to attack someone who is proclaiming themselves pro-life, say they're not pro-life, turn pro-life people against them, so that we can then try to push our side through, I guess. I don't know. I just, it doesn't feel like it's the best strategy towards moving forward, you know? I think that when you said all of us want to abolish abortion, I believe that that's true, you know? And would you also agree that all of us want to abolish abortion quickly?
I think that's quickly is where we have to rely on the grace and mercy and direction of God, and all of this is how we're moving about this. Sean, when you referred to and say that, you know, there's some that out there speaking against the the establishment in the pro-life community, I in the most professional way that I can express this, I would say I take a little bit of It makes me a little bit, gets me a little bit upset, gets me a little bit riled up. I'm going to stay very professional, but it does, because when I travel this state of Tennessee and I visit the chapters that we have across this state, and I talk to volunteers that tell me, we've had this chapter here for 20 years. And I say, well, how do you, who started it? Where did it go? Well, I did. I was here. I started this 20 years ago. And when I'm talking to volunteers across the state of Tennessee that are telling me, I've given my life, I've given my own personal finances, I've given my vehicles, I've given everything, that I'm the one that personally I'm supporting the pregnancy resource centers in my area. I look and I hear comments that are coming of saying, there's some organizations that just aren't doing enough. They're not putting they're not putting their money where their mouth is. They're not doing what they say that they're going to be doing. But then I'm traveling. I can only speak for the state of Tennessee, but I'm traveling and listening to our leaders, the people that are saying that their children are serving with them at fairs and going into schools and teaching and educating about abortion and disability and end of life. And this is a grassroots movement that has been made up across Tennessee, Sean, not by people that pull a salary and have a platform and a microphone. This is people that are giving their life. They're giving their livelihood. They're giving everything they've got, and they've done it for 20 plus years, 30 years at some points. So to listen to a kind of a casting accusation to say there's some organizations not giving enough, makes me want to defend those that's in our organization that aren't even receiving a paycheck and haven't for 20, 30 years and are still giving their life to this cause each and every day. But I want to follow that up by saying I will agree with that. I will agree with what is coming and saying we're not doing enough. I'll agree with that. And as the executive director of Tennessee Right to Life, I take full responsibility for it. And I'll tell you what it is. We're not fasting and praying enough. We're not. We've called for a full statewide fasting and prayer for all of our chapters across the state. We participated in it together this year. That's not enough. We're going to keep doing it. We're going to keep serving. We're going to keep doing more. We don't have enough chapters across the state of Tennessee. You know what that's going to require? More volunteers like the ones that's already served for 20 and 30 years to ignite passion in the ones that's going to start the new chapters, that's going to see this happen across the state. So yeah, we're not doing enough. We're not connected with enough churches in the state of Tennessee. That's on me. I'm going to make sure that that's my goal and my responsibility and my mission to lead Tennessee Right to Life, and the mission of seeing this nonprofit come under the direction and the authority of the church of God, of God's laws in the state of Tennessee.
And I think that's really important, and I think that something that I shared recently was it's a quote by a guy named Dwayne Noel. He goes by Cowboy Dwayne, and he says this country's only as good as the churches in this country. The churches are only as good as the families that the churches are built upon. Those families are only as good as the marriages in those families, and those marriages are only as good as the husbands that God put in charge of those marriages. As goes the husband, so goes the marriage. As goes the marriage, so goes the family. As goes the family, so goes the churches. As goes the churches, so goes the country. And all that to say that that it takes leadership, but it takes God, right? It takes changing the culture, which takes God, and which takes leadership. And so I agree with you. I think that all of that is very important. I think that a complete and total reliance on God is very important. And so with that, though, we also have to do the work that God has put onto our hands, right? And so yes, we're in agreement that and look, and you're not calling for a statewide fasting and prayer, and then that's it, right? And then we're just going to do that and wait until abortion ends. Like, you're also then going out and doing the work, and so in that work, some of the criticism that has come, and this criticism has gone both ways, is that the establishment or the pro-life, the pro-life establishment. Andrew Wood, our friend Andrew Wood, calls it the pro-life industrial complex. But that there have been times when right to life organizations and other organizations as well have lobbied against abolitionist bills. There are times when abolitionists lobby against incrementalist bills. Okay, so it's happening both ways, or it has in the past happened both ways. So my position, and I'm going to allow you to challenge this, but my position is that if you are pro-life and you want abortion to end, and you are ever sitting next to Planned Parenthood in opposition of a pro-life bill, you are on the wrong side. I'd like your thoughts on that.
Yeah, Sean, so you said something there that's very, very important. There's a word there that you used. You said strategy. And then you kind of identify, we have those two labels that are kind of being pushed around a lot right now, abolitionist versus incrementalist. So which side, which pot do you fall into? Which category do you fall into is kind of where this divide is starting to become. So the question that you asked of if you ever are sitting on the side of Planned Parenthood, one, immediately we would both agree, and I think everyone listening to this would agree, that's not a good look at all. That is not a good look. I think what we have to do is that we as the community, we as the pro-life community, need to do a better job of educating, understanding, and investigating for ourselves the reasonings behind when we start stepping into laws being changed, upholding legislation, all of those things. I had this setting here. I want to show you this. Here's a 2-page document, back and front. That is all the laws that Tennessee Right to Life has worked on for the past 50 years in the state of Tennessee. There's a bunch that is on that paper right there. And each one of those laws...
Whether they have passed or not?
Yes, exactly. Okay. And so each one of those laws has been a building block. It's been a piece of the framework that has been built to build one of the most pro-life states in the United States. There's no argument against that. We are one of the most pro-life states. And it has taken the work of the volunteers that I mentioned, that the people that has been involved in this for years and years to build this framework and foundation in the state of Tennessee for life. So then you say, well, what about the time when we've seen somebody sitting on the opposite side, when we've seen somebody that feels like that they are voting against something that would protect life? I would encourage you, sometimes, I'm not saying it's all the time, sometimes you may be right. There may be a bad decision, something bad happened, there was somebody sitting on the wrong side, but I would encourage the listeners to look into all of the work and time and effort and energy that it has taken to build the framework of life through the laws in the state. And then to see and look at a law that's being introduced that would destroy that entire framework and then would take a chance of that law being passed or not in whatever state that may be, in whatever organization that you're working with, and to see that because of one decision, because of a new law that's been introduced or a new group that has a new ideal of how to get from A to Z, there are going to be times when those that have been in this for a long time, that's been doing this for 50 years, are going to look at that and say there is no way that that law is going to be passed. There's not the people in place, the team, the legislators, all of those things that are not in place to be able to pass that and see that get through. So all this work and time that you've invested 50 years, 30 years, 20 years, whatever it may be, into building that network and framework, there's a chance that you could see that all crumble with one decision.
Okay. I understand all of that, and I don't disagree with any of it, but let me challenge that. What if it did pass? And we're going to get into what some of these proposed bills do, and why I agree with you that they don't make sense at this point. But just challenging the idea that you just presented, because I hear everything you're saying, and I think that that it makes sense, but in the big picture, removing ourselves and trying. I hope this is an objective way to look at it. That what we're saying is, we don't think your bill will pass, therefore we are going to push against it. What if it did pass?
So I would ask a question back,
Yeah.
Sean, to that, and I would say, you said, what if it did pass? And I would say, do we have the framework and the network established right now in the United States of America to support that decision, to support that law? Is the churches in the United States of America united to such an extent and unified in the movement of pro-life that if laws like this passed, that we would be able to support the network across the state, whatever state that may be,
Yeah.
across the nation, whatever, our nation here? Do we have the pieces and parts of the puzzle in place to be able to support? And that's when you begin to talk about culture.
So let's. I want to make sure that we're not speaking in ambiguity, because I feel like you and I know what we're talking about, but for the people who are listening, who are kind of like waiting for us to clarify, would it be fair to say that what we're talking about is laws that would criminalize women in abortion?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so that is just. I just wanted to clarify that is what we're talking about, because that is what we will get into in a minute.
Absolutely.
And I think you and I both have a lot of thoughts on everything you just said, right? And so again, I'm gonna ask the question though, and I'm challenging the idea: what if it would pass? And look, let me go a little further with that. So, and the only reason I'm asking this question is because we're taking the position that that we, as the people who have been here for 50 years, and that's an arbitrary number that I'm using.
Mm-hmm.
We, as the people who have been here the longest and have been working and have built these frameworks, right? We are looking at the bill that you are proposing, and based on everything that we believe and we know, we do not think there's any chance that will pass. Okay, which I think is a separate issue from the issue you just brought up that is really important and is the bigger issue, right? But we do not believe that bill will pass. But what if the bill would pass? And here's what I mean by that. What would that actually say about our beliefs about the legislature? What would that actually say about our beliefs about the voter, like the average pro-life voter, right? That right now we are under the belief, and it's a good faith belief, and it may be a correct belief, but we are under the belief that the average voter, the legislatures, the governor, right, who has to, because you're talking about two houses in most cases, or in all cases, two houses and a governor, are not going to agree to this, right? So there's two sides to that. If we're right, then let the bill go. Because if we're right, then we're not getting in the way of it, but it's not passing, right? If we're wrong, then our belief about what these people who have the ability to pass the bill believe has been wrong, right? And so I think that it would be important to know that. If we feel so strongly that an abolitionist bill cannot pass in this state, then getting in the way of it has no impact other than creating division in the pro-life movement. If we're right? Because it just won't pass. And then they will be shown that it won't pass, and they will have to rethink their strategy on how are they going to do this. But right now, the position that they have been put in is, and bear with me, I'm literally learning as I'm speaking, right? Like I'm just trying to think through this. So right now the position that they've been put in is, we proposed this bill because we believed it could pass. Other forces external to those who could have passed it have gotten it knocked out. Therefore, we have no reason to believe that it wouldn't have passed, but for these people, right? So if instead, moving forward with complete confidence that this bill will not pass, right? We allowed them to make their mistakes. Look, this is an analogy just came to me because, we're talking about an organization that has been building this framework for 20, 30, 40 years, right? And someone that's come in the last 5 or 10 years, right? So let's analogize it to a parent-child, right? Like, there are so many times throughout the day. I got 5 kids. My oldest is 11. So there's a lot of learning experiences. There are so many times throughout the week that I sit back and watch my kid do something that I absolutely know with certainty that you will not succeed. Like, it's not possible, Like, this is a really bad idea. And if it's a really, really bad idea, like I love what Nick Freitas says. I want to give him credit for this, but he says, I want to protect my kids from scars. I don't want to protect them from bruises. Bruises are a normal part of life, right? So I let my kids fall. I let my kids fail. And then if they need me, I'm there to scoop them up. But I let them fail. Like, I don't I prefer to sit back and watch them learn how it won't work to stopping them from doing it because I know it won't work, right? Because if I tell them it won't work, as soon as I leave the room, they're going to try to do it again. And then they're going to figure out it won't work. And it almost is. And I don't want to it's not my attempt in using this analogy to pigeonhole or box anybody into a childish position, right? But that's kind of the position that we're taking is, we have been doing this for a very long time. You are fresh into this. Our experience tells us that what you are trying to do will not work. Therefore, we will not let you try it, right? So I'd like your thoughts on that was a lot, man. I'd like your thoughts on that. But then I want to get into what you were starting to talk about, which I think is really important. What happens if it passes, right? Like what's the plan? That's the big question. What's the plan?
So going kind of back through what you were saying there over the last couple of minutes, my response back to that would be is that, what message are we sending to those that are depending on us in the state of Tennessee to make sure that we are standing with them in the area that we are supposed to be? We're supposed to be the gatekeeper. We're supposed to be the ones monitoring, making sure that the laws are being upheld, making sure that the pregnancy resource centers can continue to do their work in the state of Tennessee, because if those laws pass, the pregnancy resource centers, my mind begins to think, it begins to go down a rabbit trail of what's going to happen to the pregnancy resource centers in our state. So it is our responsibility, it's our duty, it's our job, it's our God-given call to stand and to say that when we see something that we feel and that we believe and that we are convicted to a point to say, if this passes, if this is put into place, the framework that has been established, and I'm speaking for the state of Tennessee, across the state of Tennessee, to support women, to save babies, to support the women that have taken the abortion pill and are now seeking the abortion reversal pill. Those things, we are called to stand up. We're called to take the position, no matter what that makes us look like, no matter what side we're perceived to be on. We're called to stand up for women and children and families in the state of Tennessee. So that would be my response to that, is that it's more than just what is the perception It's when we are convicted, and this is what we believe, and this is what we understand through years and years of looking at how these things come and what the processes are and how many steps it takes to make these things, to make laws go into place, and how many things along the way can trip those things up to where then it doesn't happen at all. That's where an organization like Right to Life is standing, is looking at this from that point of view, standing up for what we are the gatekeepers of, and protecting those that are doing God's work in the state of Tennessee.
And so then what we're saying is, not only do we think this, reasonably, that this law is not going to pass, so why waste our time on it, but also acknowledging that if it passes, we're not we're not in a good spot. Like it's going to impact way more than just what is in the face of the bill, right?
Right. Right.
And it's going to have potential negative impacts that have not been thought through by the people trying to propose the bill on the rest of the pro-life movement, right?
Right.
And so I think that's really important. So it's not necessarily just a complete like disregard for the fact that, or for the potential that it could pass. It's also an acknowledgement that it could pass, and if it does, it could have a lot of negative impacts that haven't quite been thought through. So I sent you an article.
Can I propose a question to what you're saying right there?
Yeah, please.
So I would propose the question of saying, is it possible that criminalizing women becomes the easier alternative to what the churches and the pregnancy resource centers and the pro-life organizations need to be doing in this slow, costly work of discipleship, support, restoration, care, all the things that we are called to do? Going back to 2 Chronicles 7:14, that to me feels like that's the hard work. That's what takes blood, sweat, and tears. That's what takes hundreds of thousands of volunteers. That's the people that don't have a mic and a platform and are just saying, this is what I think needs to happen, and generalizing all women need to be criminalized that are contemplating or have had an abortion or are going to have an abortion. The hard work, the really getting your hands dirty and doing what I feel is God's work, is what the church, the pregnancy resource centers, other organizations across the state, across the nation need to be doing collectively together in unity. That to me seems like the God-given call. That's the harder route. It seems easier. And we've seen an article this morning that referred to it as lazy in a sense of saying that's almost feels lazy to me. Yeah.
I hear what you're saying, and I don't know how to respond to that. Just being genuine, I think that that gives me something to think about. I'll tell you this: my dad was with me throughout the entire time in Washington D.C. My dad is pro-life. He has been donating to pro-life organizations at least since I lost my first child to abortion, so that's 29 years. When he had not much to give, right? Now, independently of the work that I do, he runs with a couple of other people the Louisiana billboard campaigns, putting up pro-life billboards, and so he's doing his own pro-life work. But he represents the average person at home without the microphone, right? Without the platform and the microphone. The average person who benefits zero from this, right? Other than he wants to end abortion, and he wants to save the babies that are in danger of being aborted. And if he is successful in one or overall, then that's how he benefits, right? But he represents the person who is sitting in their house writing that $20, $30, $50, $100 check every month to a pro-life organization. His entire worldview on this was rocked in hearing a lot of the things that were said. He is completely against the criminalization of women. but is still thinking through, is my money going to the place that it's most effective to ending abortion? And so I say all of that to say, I, if there is a way that is easier but more effective, that doesn't make it wrong. I don't believe the criminalization of women is that way. I just am challenging the overall thought that we have to do it the hard way if we find an easier way to do it. I don't know that that if you, and then I'm gonna bring up something that echoes what you just said, that was in an article I sent you yesterday. But if for instance you trained to be a plumber, all right? You trained your whole life to be a plumber, and you learned this one way, and it's a difficult way to take apart these pipes and to do this work, and you trained other people on how to do it, and it's the process, and and it works, and and in doing this process, you make, because as a vocation, your job, your goal is to make money, and I don't want to conflate the idea that the Right to Life organizations or anyone in the pro-life movement is out to make money. Mm-hmm. But as a plumber, your goal is to make money. And you do this process, and it earns you $500, right? And then somebody comes along and says, I can take 15 steps out of this 20-step process and still earn $500. Would it make sense to say, well, you're taking the lazy way, you're taking the easy way? If the goal is still achieved by doing it in a way that removes some of the steps, that doesn't necessarily in and of itself mean that it's bad. And so while the current plan, I agree with you, the current plan is not the most effective plan. In fact, this is what I wanted to read to you. This is from a website called Christ Overall. It was written by Ryan Helfenbein, who is the vice president of Liberty University. And he said a lot of things. He said positives and negatives about every single person in the pro-life movement, right? Or every single divided side. But this is something that he said, and this, from what I can tell, Christ Overall appears to be an abolitionist website. Most of the articles written come from an abolitionist stance, but this is the last sentence in the third paragraph, and it says, then there are the abolitionists who stand on biblical conviction demanding total immediate abolition without exception, compromise, or a viable strategy to achieve it. And I think that to me is a bigger deal than whether or not it's easier, right? And maybe they go hand in hand, Daniel. Like, maybe the reason it's easier is because there's no viable strategy, But if somebody could come in today and say, we're going to end abortion today, and I can do it, and I can do it in an hour and a half, like, I don't think that you're going to step up and say, wait a minute, like, what about all the hard work we had planned today, right? Mm-hmm. Like, let's not take the easy path. But more importantly, that is there a viable strategy to achieve it? And I think this is what we'll probably end up spending the rest of our time on, is the criminalization of women. So I'll give you my thoughts, and then I want to hear your thoughts on this. But these are my thoughts, and these are my thoughts alone, is that if we agree as a pro-life movement that the baby in the womb is an image bearer of God with the full value and dignity of human life, of any other human, which I believe is what everyone in the pro-life movement says they believe, right? Otherwise, what are we fighting for? If none of that is correct, then what are we fighting for? So if we believe that the baby in the womb is an image bearer of God with the full value and dignity of any other human being, and we believe that if a mother drowns her newborn, she should face legal consequences, then at some point, we as a society should be able to agree that if that newborn had the same value as the baby in the womb, then a mother who kills the baby in the womb should face legal consequences. So that is me stating my personal belief on where I think that we should get. Coupled with, we are not there yet. And I think that's really important. We are not there yet. And look, like the abolitionists can be, everyone's got these extreme ideas of what they say. They pigeonhole everyone into, and you did a really good job of saying, I don't want to put anybody in a box, because that's really important, because there's 150 different boxes out there. And but they say that the pro-life establishment or the incrementalists believe that every woman is a victim. I don't think that's a true statement. I think that's a disingenuous statement. I think the reality is that we can see the women who are, because we can see it. It's on TikTok, like it's everywhere. Like you can see the women who are making jokes about it, right? You can see the women who say, yeah, it's a baby. I don't care. I'm going to kill it. I'm going to kill this baby. Like, not a victim, right? Like, not every woman is a victim. However, the abolitionists always also take the standpoint that no women are victims. So we're taking two extremes here, right? They're saying, you say everyone is a victim, which is not true. We say no one is a victim, not true. And the reason that I know that's not true is because there are still videos or images coming out where women who received the abortion pill are posting on Reddit threads the picture of the baby with comments that are just horrible. And they're saying, I cannot believe that this is a human. This is a person with fingers and toes and eyes and arms and legs. And I was told I was going to pass a really big blood clot. I was told there was going to be a bunch of mucus. This is a baby, and they're in shock. And I think that we have to recognize, as a pro-life movement, as a society, that Planned Parenthood and the abortion industry has been very effective at 53 years of hammering in the message that it's not a baby, 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 it's not a baby. Dude, like so many comments on my social media posts are people saying it's not a baby, it's a fetus. Like, and dude, I am exhausted at having discussions of what's the difference between a baby and a fetus, because they don't care. What they're saying is a fetus isn't a baby, right? And it's not their original thought. It's that this has been hammered in with very effective messaging. And everyone in the pro-life movement should be able to agree that Planned Parenthood and the abortion industry has been very effective in their messaging, because if they hadn't, we would not be here fighting this today. And so in order to get past that, we have to fight back with the same strategy, right? Until we have made clear that there is no way for a reasonable person to believe that it's not a baby, right? Otherwise, what we're saying is that we are going to be the people who are able to determine whether this mom who took the abortion pill falls in the category of thinking it was going to be a blood clot or a clump of cells or membrane, and being shocked that it's a baby, or knowing that it was a baby and doing it intentionally. And we're going to have to figure that out every single time. And I don't think that we can do that, and are we going to investigate every miscarriage? And if we investigate every miscarriage, because look, like how do we know it was a miscarriage? How do we know they didn't take the abortion pill? And if the only reason we know that it was a miscarriage and they didn't take the abortion pill is because they're posting online how grieving they are, well, then everybody that takes the abortion pill is just going to post how grieving they are, right? And how do we get into someone that fell down the stairs and lost their baby? Did they fall down the stairs on purpose? How are we investigating that? Are we getting into all these grieving families and investigating what's going on? How do we know that the boyfriend didn't put the pill in. This is happening all the time in the mom's drink without her knowing, right? So now she thinks she had a miscarriage. They find out she has the abortion pill in her system, and are we going to prosecute her? How do we find out that whether or not the boyfriend did that? How do we know if the boyfriend isn't saying, if you don't do what I say, I'm going to tell them you had an abortion, and then he poisoned her? Or how do we know that the girl doesn't say, if you don't do what I say, I'm going to take the abortion pill and tell them you poisoned me? Like, there are so many things. And look, man, this is just me being a lawyer that it's coming out. Like, so many things that have not been thought through. You know, what happens if you pass it? You know, and you're talking about other things, like what happens to and I want you to get into detail about that, about the pregnancy centers and all that. But like, what happens if you pass this? Like, how are you going to enforce this? How are you going to enforce the mom who goes from South Carolina, where there's an abolitionist bill, you know, it had been presented at least, goes from South Carolina to Virginia, you know, has an abortion, and comes back. Like she went and did something legal where it was legal, and then she came back. Like, there is no strategy, you know, and I think that's the important thing. Like, we're not there yet as a society to be able to be sure that everyone is in line with, I know this is a baby and I'm intentionally killing my baby, because there has to be the intent that comes with a crime like murder, right? And murder is the intentional killing, so there has to be the intent to kill, and we have to get past that messaging. And it took them 53 years to hammer in this messaging, like to suggest that we're just going to say it is so, and everybody's mind's going to shift is not realistic. So
Sean, what you're saying right there is so important, man, about the strategy. You know, we keep saying that word strategy. What is the strategy? What are we doing? What's the plan? All those things. And we're taking into account, you just listed an array of different situations that I don't think we're thinking that all the way through. And in the midst of this strategy, it feels like the strategy is going further away from implementing the church and the pregnancy resource centers and all of those, and unifying to that. We're shifting the strategy back to a government, and to propose the question of, do we really believe that the same government that legalized, normalized, profited from this past 50 plus years of preying on women is now morally equipped, is morally capable of judging them? And if we criminalize this same group of women? So the logical process there, the logical thinking that through, the state has called abortion health care. We've all heard that. The state, and still does to this day, calls abortion health care, has incentivized abortion, and still does incentivize abortion. The state has failed women. So if we can agree on all of those things, am I being asked in this divide that we've seen created here, am I being asked to now trust that same state, that same government, to prosecute women? That's one that I cannot get past. That's one that I'm so unsettled about that, because some of the same organizations in the pro-life movement that have said the government, you can't believe what the government has supported and said and stood up for and been a part of and even profited from for these past 50 plus years. But now we're moving towards a strategy that is removing the church, the pregnancy resource centers, the people who are volunteered for 20 plus years around the states, and we're moving towards a government, a state that we've seen the results of what they've done for the past 50 plus years. So that's one that I'm really, really unsettled on, and one that I think there's a lot of holes in that one, again, that we're not really thinking through the strategy there. What is the strategy? Not just all the things that you just listed, which is an amazing list of things of, hey, we need to think about all these different situations that are happening. But just on surface face value, we are placing the trust back in the hands of an entity, a government, an organization that we have said for 50 plus years has preyed on the same women that we're enacting laws into place to say, now we want you to judge them.
Right.
I don't understand that.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. And to do it at the same time that other states are saying this is acceptable. You know,
Mm-hmm.
there's no cohesive message. And I think that that makes it. I mean, there's no cohesive message now, right? Like there's 12 states. Correct me if I'm wrong, or if you know, but I counted them and then I forgot. Let's say around 10 states, 10 more or less that have enshrined abortion as a right in their constitutions,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And then there's more ballot measures coming
Mm-hmm.
since Roe versus Wade. And this is one of Abby's and the people that are echoing her message. This is one of their points. Is, you know, we overturned Roe versus Wade and we turned it back to the states, and now we have abortion enshrined in state constitutions where it never was before. You know, and in some of those states, red states. You know,
Mm-hmm.
and so you know, was it a win? And we don't need to get into that because that's a different topic. But the division of the states, I think, is important because you know, it doesn't send a good message. And so here is what I think is a path forward. Okay. And then I'll let you kind of close us out on what your thoughts on that, or if you think there's a better path forward, you know, and then how Tennessee Right to Life is working towards that path. So what I see as a path forward, and I don't have a timeline on this, but I think if this is the path forward, then let's get it done, right? Like how as fast as we can. Is we have to end the manufacture and sale of abortion pills in the United States. That has to come from more than the state level, right? We have to, you know, in the meantime, stop the shipment of abortion pills from one state to the next, because there are states who have already said no, and you know we are neglecting, you know, several commerce laws by allowing this to happen, that are already in place. You don't even have to create new laws; you just have to enforce the ones that exist. But get them to stop shipping. We have to have penalties for people who do ship them across state lines. And that's in the meantime. But the big picture is end the sale and manufacture of the abortion pill in the United States, end the distribution of the abortion pill in the United States. Make it illegal in the United States for abortionists to do the procedures, right? If it is illegal across state lines for abortions to occur, or for the abortion pill to be prescribed, that has to be the foundation. You talked earlier about foundations, right? That has to be the foundation upon which we then start working towards, now you're breaking laws, right? Beyond killing your baby. Now you're breaking laws, you know, by you're doing this illegally. And we need to prosecute people. And when I say people, you know, at first, we need to prosecute the abortionists. We need to prosecute the prescribers. We need to prosecute these entities that are selling the abortion pill that aren't even pharmacies. Like, and I think there's some investigations into some of them, which is a great first step. But like those things have to happen before we can talk about realistically criminalizing women, because it's nonsensical to say, hey, here, like, you're never going to get a criminalization of women bill passed in California. Okay. And like I challenged you on that notion in Tennessee, right? But California's crazy. And so you're not going to get a criminalization of women bill passed in California. Therefore, even if you get it passed in Louisiana, where I am, in South Carolina, in Tennessee, in the most pro-life states, in Texas, they can still just go to California, right? And then what? And so I think there has to be a viable strategy, as the article put it. So I'll let you kind of put your thoughts on that, and then we'll close it out.
Yeah, so Sean, again, I said at the beginning of the podcast, so I'm glad I did, because I kind of covered myself on that, is that a lot of what I'm going to say is going to take you right back to the Bible. It's going to take you right back to biblical principles and God's law. And we go back, we've already talked about 2 Chronicles 7:14 and the if and then. But, I think my concern, my way of closing this out, I agree with everything you just said, by the way. But my warning is a historical warning. So when we look at across, the years and years past, and we say repeating the same thing over and over again is what's the definition of insanity. So we look at, when we study history, which is what we're supposed to do, study history. And when we look at awakenings that have happened across our nation, when we see first, second, third, fourth grade awakening that's happened across our nation, and we look at how did those awakenings start, what kept them going, the momentum that happened, and then why did they end? I'm not going to be a biblical philosopher on here. I'm not going to give you a bunch of data about the 4 great awakenings that happened. The point I want to make is this. They started because people decided that you had to get humble first, you had to pray, you had to seek God's face, and we had to turn from our wicked ways. That's how the awakening started every single time. We're on the verge, I believe. I think we've felt it, we've seen it, we've experienced what we would call a life awakening in our nation. The overturning of Roe v. Wade, the celebratory piece of that. Yeah, some were saying it, they're not as celebrating as much, but that's still monumental in our history of seeing that happen. That piece igniting the flames of seeing the younger generations that are flooding pro-life organizations across our nation. How can we get involved? What can we do? How can we get the message out? It's following the same exact pattern as the first 4 great awakenings that happened in our nation. Repentance, humbling ourselves, seeing those things happen. Then you see the younger generations become involved in it. And then the reason why they ended is because of, if you study it, it's because of things that's called old lights versus new lights, radical abolitionist versus reformist, political, all the things that begin to happen to divide and put people, put organizations, put individuals against each other and break the unified cord going forward. So my warning, my historical warning, as we go forward into this, as we continue to look at, Sean, you're continuing to look at ways to bring people together, to unify, to say, what do we want in the pro-life movement? You asked that question when we started out. Where are we going with this? I think to go forward, we have to look back. We have to look back and say, that 4th great awakening that happened, that involved people like Billy Graham, which everybody listening to this podcast knows that name. He was a part of the 4th great awakening. When did that 4th great awakening start to fade? If you study that, I encourage every one of the listeners to study this. If you look at this, there's no way you can deny that it started to fade around the early 1970s. What happened in 1973? Our country said it was okay to kill babies.
Yep.
And that's when we begin to see the division. That's when we begin to see infighting, and some took the political side and some took all these different sides were formed. And the 4th great awakening, which was entering into what was the information highway and all these things that were going to happen. The 4th great awakening could have been a worldwide awakening, and it faded out because of what I believe, my theory is because of what happened in 1973. So when we fast forward to the next 100 years, what are they going to look back on us in 2026 and say about the potential for the fifth great awakening that was coming to our country. We've seen it happen. We've seen the momentum. We've seen the young people. We watched Charlie Kirk give his life for the cause. And what are they going to say about us 100 years from now when they look back on Daniel Breeden and Sean and all the others that are in this movement? What are they going to say about us?
Yeah. You know, and that echoes what I posted on social media yesterday, which was, abortion's going to end, and your kids are going to ask you, what were you doing while 3,000 babies per day were being killed in the United States? And what are you going to say?
That's right. That's right,
and
brother.
I think that should be the overarching message that every single person in the pro-life movement, every single pro-life person who would not until now say they were in the movement, right? Every person who's passively pro-life, like, what are you doing?
That's right.
And that's a different. I don't want to get too far into that, but I hope people will think about it, because that's the goal of this entire thing, this entire exercise in this series, is to get people thinking. You said the way that I said it in the Substack that I wrote was, think that you may be mistaken,
Yeah,
no matter
right.
what side you're on.
Mm-hmm.
You hear the other side, and it's easy to dismiss them, right? But think that you may be mistaken. Like, what truths may there be to what they are saying? And you said it differently. You said it scripturally with 2 Chronicles 7:14. Did I get that right?
Yes,
That humble yourself, which is the same thing.
Mm.
Like take a step back and
That's
think
right.
about what's going on. What does this all mean? And the big thing is that once we've thought it all through, if we can all recognize that everyone who's in this wants to abolish abortion,
Mm-hmm.
how can we work together?
That's right.
And at the very least, how can we not be working against each other?
Yes.
To try to achieve that goal? And so I think it's going to take conversations. You brought up Charlie Kirk, and I think that that was something that I'm going to have conversations with people who disagree with me on pretty much everything, right? In this process, and I think that was a great thing that Charlie Kirk did, was he was willing to let anyone take the mic.
Mm-hmm.
And
That's right.
and in that disagreement, I think it's important for me to recognize that just because I'm the person who edits the podcast and says it's mine, right? It doesn't mean that I'm right.
That's right.
I'm still thinking through all of this as well and learning as well. So I think that man, I really appreciate you. As a person, as a brother, as a person in this pro-life movement, I know the work that you're doing, and I know your heart for this, and I appreciate you taking the time to engage in this conversation, and get us started in this series of conversations, because, we are friends, and I would hope that I'm friends with everyone that I talk to, but, I already knew going into this that a lot of what we thought aligned, and some of these conversations that I'm going to have, I don't feel that confident that I'm going to align with them, but the conversations are still important, and people need to hear it, and they need to not be hearing it from random places, right? And from gossip and from rumors and from whatever. Like, let's get it all out. Let's put it all on the table. And then the people who are watching, the people who are listening can figure out, like, what do I believe now that I have all this information? And I think that's really important. And then they can make an informed decision and support whomever it is that they want to support. And and I on the notion of support, while that wasn't really a planned thing to say, I do want to say that if you appreciate what we're doing at Men for Life and the work that we're doing, you can support us as well by going to menforlife.org. And at the very least, if you watching this podcast on YouTube, subscribe to our channel, click the like button, leave us a comment, help the algorithm, because the YouTube algorithm is not friendly to pro-life, but you can help us to get this message out to as many people as possible. Daniel Breeden, Tennessee Right to Life, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate you very much.
Thank you, brother. Love you much, and praying for your organization.
Same to you.
God bless.